The nations that reigned Judea. Israel, the nation which is described as the nation of God, was historically established, as an independent kingdom in 1905 BC by a king. In 1451 BC the Israelites dispossessed the Canaanites who dwelt in the land, and lived without a king, or a kingdom, until 1905 BC. However, it was only in 1905 BC that a king was appointed for Israel. Saul was the first king of Israel. He ruled the land for close to 40 years. When Saul was killed, in the battle against the Amalekites, David was enthroned as the king. David also reigned for 40 years. After the death of David, Solomon, his son, came to the throne. He came to power in 1015 BC, and continued his regime until 975 BC. In 975 BC, after the period of Solomon, Israel was divided into two nations. The northern territory of the land was called as Israel, and southern territory was called as Judea. The southern territory was occupied by the tribe of Judah and Benjamin. The remaining tribes of Israel dwelt in northern territory, which is Israel. Samaria and Jerusalem became the capital cities of Israel and Judea respectively. In 721 BC Israel was captured by the Assyrian kings. Its inhabitants were carried away as salves, and exiled to other nations. Likewise, inhabitants from other nations, which were under the control of Assyria, were brought to Israel. The remnant Israelites mixed up with the Gentiles who were brought into Israel. The Israelites who thus coexisted with the Gentiles, were called as Samaritans. Judea, the southern territory, continued to exist till 625 BC. In the year 625 BC Josiah the king of Judah was killed in the battle fought against the Egyptian king Pharaoh Nebo. After about 25 years, that is, until 600 BC, Judah was subjected under the control of the Egyptians. Later Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian king, invaded Jerusalem. During his regime, in 586 BC the first Temple of Jerusalem was destroyed. The Babylonians ruled Jerusalem for around 70 years. When the Persians captured the power from the hands of the Babylonians, the territory of Judah fell under the control of the Persians. Cyrus, king of Persia, not only granted authority for the Jews to rebuild the temple, but also returned the vessels and other articles of the temple into the hands of the Jews. During those days, some of the Jews returned back to Jerusalem, and built an altar, and offered the sacrifice, and started to rebuild the temple. At that time, the Israelites who had mixed up with other Gentiles, also known as the Samaritans, compelled that they be included in the repair works of the temple. Since the Jews did not agree for this, they appealed to the king, and obstructed the repair work of the temple. After Cyrus, when King Artaxerxes came to power in 445 BC, he sent people like Nehemiah and Ezra, and granted permission to repair the walls of the temple. During those days, the captain of Samaria, Sanballat, once again hindered the repair works of the walls of the temple. In 332 BC Alexander invaded Persia. At that time, Judah and Samaria came under the control of the Greeks. Several Jews dwelt in Alexandria, the Greek city. In order to stabilize their power, the Greeks coerced the inhabitants of all their territory to communicate in Greek language. In order to make the Jews to communicate in Greek, they employed certain Jews, who were in the city of Alexandria, and translated the Bible into Greek language. After the death of Alexander, his 4 companions divided the Greek Empire. The land of Judah came under the power of Ptolemy, one of the 4 companions of Alexander. Later, another captain, Antiochus Epiphanes, who was ruling Syria, besieged Judah. Apart from compelling the people of the land that they should worship him as God, Antiochus defiled the altar of the Jews. Owing to this, several Jews started to revolt against Antiochus. These Jews united together under the leadership of Mattathias and his son Maccabeus, and delivered Jerusalem from the hands of the Syrians. This took place in the year 167 BC. Afterward, Judah was under the control of Maccabees for a brief period of time. During the regime of Maccabees, when Judas Maccabeus was the leader, the temple was dedicated, and they brought about many changes. After his days, his brothers, namely John and Simon, assumed the responsibility of the leadership, and ruled the land. In 63 BC the Roman Caesar sent Pompilius, and invaded Judah. The land of Judah came under the Roman regime from 63 BC to 300 AD. During the course of time, Antipater, the Idumean, who was affluent among the Jews, was of much help to the Romans. The Idumeans are the descendant of the interracial Greek Jews. Since they were helpful to the Romans, the latter appointed Herod, the son of Antipater, as governor over Judah. Herod called himself as the King of Judah. People used to call him as Herod the Great. It was during his regime that the Temple of Jerusalem was rebuilt. Lord Jesus was also born in his days. When he died in 4 AD, the kingdom was divided into three, and given to his sons, namely Archelaus, Antipas, and Philip. Archelaus took control of Judah, while Antipas took control of Galilee, and Philip took control of the northern regions. Just after 2 years, in 6 AD, the Romans dethroned Archelaus, and united Judah and Syria, and appointed a single governor. After this, Pontius Pilate came to the power. During his days, the Jews revolted against the Romans. On account of this, Titus, the Roman general, was sent to Jerusalem. He not only captured Jerusalem, but also burnt down the Temple of Jerusalem. This happened in 70 AD. Later, during the 4th century, Constantine, the Roman emperor, rebuilt the city of Jerusalem. During the 7th century, the Persians invaded Jerusalem. The Christians, known as the Crusaders, took Jerusalem from the hands of the Persians, and reigned it for about 88 years. Later the Turks invaded Judah and joined it, along with Palestine, and reigned the land, from 1517 AD to 1917 AD. In 1914 AD the First World War took place. At the end of the war, the United Nations handed over the land of Judah to the British. The British reigned Judah from 1918 AD up to 1948 AD. In 1948 AD, the United Nations divided the land between the Jews and Arabs. Subsequently the nation of Judah came into existence. Nevertheless, the Jews received only a portion of Jerusalem. In the war that took place between the Jews and the Arabs in 1967 AD, Judah captured the entire land of Jerusalem, and some regions of Palestine. Since the period of the Gentiles over Judah came to an end, and the nation of Judah has become a separate state, we can say that the period of Gentiles over the land of Judah has been fulfilled.